There was never any loan. That's what my cousin Evan said across a courthouse table, wearing the same silver watch he'd bought 2 weeks after I wired him $48,000. He said it calmly, like the signed note in my folder was a grocery receipt, and not the one thing keeping me from losing the small savings I'd built from 12-hour nursing shifts. By the end of that morning, the judge had entered judgment for the full amount, interest, and costs. By the end of the month, a lien on Evan's new townhouse forced him to pay what he swore he never borrowed. But to understand how a family favor turned into a courtroom silence nobody at that table forgot, I have to go back to the Sunday dinner where he first asked me for money. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had family treat your boundaries like a personal insult, I think this one will feel familiar. A quick note. Some details have been changed for privacy and storytelling, but the emotions at the heart of this are real. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, because the part that made Evan go quiet in court started with one folded piece of paper on my kitchen table. My name is Daniela, and at the time this happened, I was 34, working as a charge nurse on a medical surgical floor in a mid-sized hospital outside Cleveland. That sounds steadier than it felt. Nurses make decent money, but decent money does not mean easy money when you are paying student loans, rent, insurance, gas, groceries, and helping your mother after her second knee surgery. My life was measured in shifts, not weeks. 3 12s if staffing held, 4 if someone quit, 5 if flu season hit the way it always did. On my days off, I slept like I owed my body back pay. I was cautious with money because I had seen what happened when people weren't. My father was the kind of man who could make a dollar last until it apologized. He died when I was 27, and what he left me was not a lot in the dramatic sense. There was no secret account, no paid-off house, no miracle inheritance. There was a blue metal lockbox, a stack of careful papers, and a sentence he'd repeated so often that it was practically part of the wallpaper in our apartment. If money changes hands, write it down. He said that when he lent my uncle $50 for a radiator. He said it when my mother let a neighbor borrow the old lawnmower. He said it when I got my first checking account and thought he was being dramatic. After he died, I understood him better. Paperwork wasn't distrust to him. It was mercy. It kept memory from becoming a weapon. It kept good intentions from turning into arguments at Christmas. It gave people a way to stay honest when pride got loud. So by the time Evan came to me, I already had that habit. I kept receipts. I saved screenshots. I didn't do cash favors without a text thread. It wasn't because I wanted to sue anybody. It was because I'd worked too many night shifts with families fighting in hospital rooms over who promised what, while someone they loved lay unconscious between them. Evan was my cousin on my mother's side. Our mothers were sisters, which meant we grew up close enough that everybody called us the almost siblings at family events, even though we were not alike. I was the kid who packed Band-Aids for a picnic. Evan was the kid who convinced 3 other children to jump off the garage roof onto a pile of couch cushions because he said he'd tested the physics. He had charm. Real charm. Not the slimy kind at first. The warm kind. The kind that made waitresses laugh and old men at hardware stores call him young man, like they were proud of him. By his mid-30s, Evan had turned that charm into a lifestyle. He sold things. Sometimes cars, sometimes software packages, sometimes commercial cleaning contracts. He was always between ventures. But somehow he was never between dinners. He wore nicer shoes than anyone else in the family. He drove a black SUV with leather seats and a sound system that made my aunt's windows rattle when he pulled into her driveway. He talked about opportunity like it was a shy animal only he knew how to approach. At family gatherings, Evan performed success. That is the only word for it. He didn't just arrive. He entered. He'd slap my younger cousins on the shoulder, kiss all the aunties on both cheeks, and say things like, "We're building something big," before anyone had asked what he was building. He'd bring expensive cupcakes from a bakery downtown and leave the box open on the counter with the receipt still tucked under the ribbon. If somebody mentioned a problem, he had a guy. If somebody mentioned a dream, he knew an investor. If somebody mentioned a bill, he changed the subject with a joke and made everyone laugh before they noticed. I didn't dislike him then. I need that to be clear. I rolled my eyes sometimes, sure. I thought he exaggerated. But he was family, and family history has a way of sanding down red flags until they look like personality quirks. When I remembered Evan, I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike in the church parking lot. I remembered him sneaking me an extra slice of cake at my 10th birthday party. I remembered him standing beside me at my father's funeral, one hand on my shoulder, saying, "If you ever need anything, I mean it." Those memories matter because they explain why I listened when he called. The first call came on a Wednesday evening in April, just after I'd finished a shift that had gone 2 hours over. I was still sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage because I didn't trust myself to drive yet. My feet hurt. My scrub top had a coffee stain near the pocket. I had eaten a granola bar for lunch at 4:10 p.m. My phone buzzed in the cup holder and Evan's name lit up. "Danny," he said when I answered. "Tell me you're not at work." "I just got out. What's up?" He made a low sound, almost a laugh. "I need a sane person. You're the only sane person in this family." That was Evan's way in. Compliment first, need second. He told me he had a business opportunity, and he said it like he was trying not to sound too excited. A friend from one of his old sales jobs had landed a contract supplying medical-grade cleaning products to a network of outpatient clinics. "Not the hospital where I worked," he said quickly. "Different network, private clinics, private." The margins were ridiculous because everybody was still sensitive about infection control, and the clinics wanted one vendor who could handle supply, delivery, and compliance documentation. Evan had the sales relationship. His partner had the supplier. What they needed was short-term capital for the first purchase order. "I wouldn't even ask," he said, "except the bank is being the bank, and the window is stupidly tight. 30 days, maybe 45. I turn it around, pay you back with interest, and you can finally take that vacation you keep pretending you don't want." I sat there with the phone against my ear, watching a security guard push a row of wheelchairs toward the elevator. I was tired enough that his words floated a little. Purchase order. Clinics. 30 days. Interest. Window. It sounded plausible because he made everything sound plausible. "How much are you talking about?" I asked. He paused. Not long. Just enough to make the number feel like a thing he didn't want to say. 48. 4,800? Another pause. 48,000. I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. He didn't laugh with me. That was the first time my stomach tightened. I had that money, but barely. It was not sitting around waiting for a cousin with shiny shoes. It was my emergency fund, my father's life insurance remnants, and 5 years of saying no to things other people said yes to. It was the down payment I hoped would become a small condo within a year or two. It was the buffer that let me sleep after a patient threatened to sue the hospital, and I wondered what would happen if my unit got cut. It was not fun money. It was not family money. It was the difference between being tired and being scared. I told Evan I couldn't talk about it in the parking garage. He said he understood. Then he asked if he could come by Sunday before dinner at Aunt Rosa's and show me the paperwork. He said, paperwork, before I did, and that helped him. It made him sound serious. It made him sound like my father would have approved. Sunday came warm and bright, the kind of spring day that tricks everyone into believing their problems are manageable. Evan arrived at my apartment with a leather folder. 2 coffees, and that black SUV double parked outside like the world had been waiting for him. He hugged me with one arm and handed me a latte with the other. "Before you say no," he said, "just hear me out." We sat at my kitchen table. It was small, with a nick in one corner from where I'd dropped a cast iron pan 2 years earlier. He spread papers across it like he was presenting a case. There was an invoice from a supplier. There was an email chain with a clinic administrator. There was a spreadsheet with projected profit. There were words I understood because of my job, and words I didn't because business people love inventing fog and calling it strategy. I asked questions. Evan answered quickly. Too quickly sometimes, but not so quickly that I could call it suspicious. He said the money would be used only to fulfill the initial order. He said the clinics paid net 30. He said he'd repay me within 60 days to be safe. He offered 10% interest like he was doing me a favor, then laughed and said, "Honestly, better return than your savings account." I didn't laugh. I looked at the invoice again. "Why me?" I asked. He leaned back, and for the first time that morning, the performance softened. "Because you're family," he said. "Because I trust you, and because if I go to one of those hard money guys, they're going to take a chunk for doing nothing. I'd rather keep that money in the family." There it was. Family. The word that can mean love, and the word that can mean no rules. I heard my father's voice in my head before I answered. "If money changes hands, write it down." "If I do this," I said, "we write a note. Simple promissory note. Amount, repayment date, interest, signatures. And the transfer goes bank to bank. No cash. No apps." Evan's face changed for half a second. It was small. If I hadn't spent years reading patients' families in waiting rooms, I might have missed it. His eyebrows lifted, and the corner of his mouth tightened like I'd served him tap water in a champagne glass. Then he smiled. "Danny," he said, "you wound me. I'm serious." "I know you're serious. That's why we love you. Nurse Daniela, Queen of Forms. Forms keep people honest." He tapped the table with 2 fingers. "Fine. Whatever makes you comfortable. I'll sign your little note." That line bothered me more than the smile. Your little note. Like the paper was a cute superstition I needed so I could sleep. But he said yes. And because he said yes, I kept going. I did not download some complicated legal contract. I used a plain template and stripped it down until it was almost boring. On one page, it said that Evan Morales borrowed $48,000 from Daniela Reyes on April 18th. It said, repayment was due in full by June 17th. It said interest would accrue at 6% annually if unpaid after the due date. It said both parties understood this was a loan, not a gift. That sentence was my addition. I put it in because of the way he had said family. I put it in because something in my chest had stayed tight. Evan read it while standing at my kitchen counter, coffee in one hand. "This is very official," he said. "That's the idea. You know I'm good for it. Then signing won't matter." He looked at me for a second, and I could feel him deciding whether to be offended. Then he laughed. "That's my cousin. I see you eyes. You people trust nobody." "Med-surg," I said. "Same haunted vibe." He signed. I signed. I took photos of the signed note with my phone and scanned it with the app I used for medical certifications. I emailed a copy to both of us with the subject line, "Promissory note, Evan loan, $48,000. Then I initiated a bank transfer from my credit union to the business account information he provided. The confirmation screen showed the date, the amount, the last 4 digits, and the receiving account name. I saved that too. Before he left, Evan hugged me again, this time with both arms. "You won't regret this," he said. "Seriously, this is going to help me break through, and I'll take care of you on the back end." Just pay me back by June 17th. That's all I need. He held up both hands. Done. You'll have it before then. When he walked out, I stood by the window and watched him jog to the SUV. The sun flashed off the windshield. He looked happy. Relieved, maybe. I tried to feel happy too. Instead, I felt like I'd just discharged a patient who insisted they were fine, while their blood pressure said otherwise. For the first 2 weeks, everything seemed normal. Evan texted updates with just enough detail to calm me down. PO accepted. Supplier confirmed ship date. Clinics are dragging on onboarding docs. Typical. He sent a photo of stacked boxes in what looked like a warehouse. He called once to say he had been on the phone all day with a procurement manager named Linda who was a nightmare, but a useful nightmare. I did what cautious people do when they are trying not to become paranoid. I checked the note. I checked the bank confirmation. I checked the calendar. Then I told myself to stop checking. At Aunt Rosa's birthday dinner in May, Evan was in full bloom. He showed up wearing a navy blazer even though the rest of us were in jeans. He brought wine too expensive for people eating baked ziti off paper plates. He pulled my mother into a dance in the kitchen while my aunt clapped and told everyone he had always been her charming boy. Business must be good, my brother Mateo said quietly beside me. I looked at him. Mateo was 2 years younger than me, a mechanic, and allergic to family theater. He had grease permanently worked into the lines of his hands, no matter how much he scrubbed. He nodded toward Evan's wrist. That watch is new. I glanced over. Evan was reaching for a serving spoon, and the watch caught the light. Silver. Heavy. Not subtle. Maybe it's fake, I said. Mateo snorted. Maybe I'm the mayor. I didn't tell Mateo about the loan that night. I had not told anyone, partly because it felt private, partly because I knew what my family would say. Some would say I was generous. Some would say I was foolish. Some would start asking Evan questions before the due date. And then I would become the person who made things awkward. So I held it close. That was my second mistake. The first was thinking a signature could protect me from the emotional part. June 17th fell on a Monday. I remember because I worked the weekend before and spent most of Sunday night awake, even though I needed sleep. At 8:03 that morning, I sent Evan a text. Morning, just checking in on repayment today per the note. Please let me know timing for transfer. I kept it polite, professional, the kind of message I would send a landlord or a dentist's office. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then nothing. At 11:42, he replied, Hey cuz, slammed today, let me call you later. Later became evening. Evening became the next morning. I texted again. No answer. I called at lunch from the staff locker room, one hand over my other ear because someone was drying their hair near the mirror. It rang twice and went to voicemail. That night, he called at 9:18. I was in my kitchen, reheating soup I didn't want. Hey, he said, too brightly. Sorry. Chaos. Absolute chaos. Okay. When are you sending the repayment? He exhaled like I had asked him to move a piano. So here's the thing. The clinic payments are delayed. Not canceled. Delayed. Their AP person is on vacation or maternity leave or something. It's bureaucracy. You know how healthcare is? I did know how healthcare was, which is why I didn't like him using it as fog. The note says repayment was due yesterday. I know what the note says. Then what's the new date? Give me 2 weeks. Evan. 2 weeks, Danny. Come on, it's me. That line did a lot of work in our family. It's me. As if a name could stand in for collateral. I closed my eyes and pictured the signed note in my email. I can give you 2 weeks, I said. But I need that in writing. Text me the new date. Silence. Then he laughed. Not a big laugh. A small one. You really don't turn it off, do you? Text me the new date. Fine. July 1st. You'll have it. He did text it after I asked again. I'll repay by July 1st. Sorry for delay. I screenshotted it because by then my father's voice wasn't just in my head. It was practically sitting across from me, arms folded. July 1st came. No money, no message. This time, when I called, it went straight to voicemail. I texted. The bubble turned blue, then nothing. I waited 3 hours and texted again. Please respond today. I need to know when you're repaying the $48,000 loan. The word loan was deliberate. I wanted him to either acknowledge it or correct it in writing. He did neither. At 7:56 p.m., my phone buzzed. Can you not be weird about this? I told you I'm handling it. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Weird. Not cautious. Not worried. Weird. One word, and somehow I was the problem. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I wrote, "It is not weird to ask for repayment of a signed loan. Please send a concrete date." He didn't answer. The next Sunday, I saw him at Aunt Rosa's. I almost didn't go, but my mother wanted a ride, and I had spent too many years letting family tension make me smaller. Evan was on the back patio with 3 cousins, telling a story about a restaurant owner who had tried to lowball him. He was holding a beer, laughing, relaxed. The silver watch was still on his wrist. When he saw me, he did not look guilty. He looked annoyed. I waited until he walked inside to get another drink. Then I followed him into the kitchen. "We need to talk." He opened the refrigerator. "About what?" "Don't do that." He closed the refrigerator slowly and turned around. The kitchen was empty except for us, but the patio door was open. Voices drifted in from outside. "Danny," he said, lowering his voice like I was embarrassing him. "Not here." "Then answer your phone." "I've been busy." "You owe me $48,000. Busy doesn't change that." His face hardened. It was the first time I saw something under the charm that I couldn't explain away. "I owe you?" he said. My mouth went dry. "Yes. You signed a note." He looked toward the patio, then back at me. "You helped family." The room seemed to get quieter, even though the voices outside were still going. "It was a loan." "It was support," he said. "For a family business. You wanted to help. Don't rewrite it now because you're anxious." I actually took one step back. Not because he yelled. He didn't. He said it gently, almost pitying. That was worse. "Evan, I have the note." He smiled. It wasn't warm. "That little thing you made me sign? Danny, come on. It says loan. It says repayment date. It says, not a gift. You think a court is going to care about some kitchen table paper between cousins?" There it was. Not confusion. Not delay. Not embarrassment. Calculation. I said, "Are you telling me you don't intend to repay me?" He picked up his beer from the counter and leaned closer. "I'm telling you there was never any loan. You helped family. And if you try to make this ugly, you're going to embarrass yourself." For a few seconds, I could not speak. I could hear Aunt Rosa laughing outside. I could hear ice drop from the freezer into the tray with a plastic crack. I could see a smear of tomato sauce on the counter from dinner. Ordinary details. That is what I remember most about the moment my cousin tried to erase $48,000 with one sentence. "There was never any loan," he said again, softer. "Let it go." Then he walked past me, back out to the patio, and started telling another story. I drove home with my mother in the passenger seat, asking 3 times if I was okay. I said I was tired. That was true, but not in the way she thought. I was tired in my bones. Tired of being careful and still being treated like a fool. Tired of being the responsible one people expected to understand when they did not behave responsibly. Tired of that word, family being pulled over my eyes like a blanket. That night, I opened my laptop and read the promissory note again. Then I read the bank transfer confirmation. Then the texts. June 17th. July 1st. I'll repay by July 1st. Repayment of the $48,000 loan. He had not disputed the word loan then. He had waited until we were in Aunt Rose's kitchen, where the pressure of family could do what facts could not. I should have slept. Instead, I made a folder on my desktop called Even Loan, capital letters. I saved everything there. The signed note, the bank transfer, the email to both of us, the texts, screenshots, a PDF export of the message thread. I named files like I named medication bags at work. Date 1st, description 2nd. April 18th, 2024 signed note. April 18th, 2024 transfer confirmation. June 18th, 2024 extension text. July 1st, 2024 repayment demand. At 1:12 a.m. I sent one more message. Evan, you told me today there was never any loan. Attached is the signed promissory note and transfer confirmation. Please repay the full balance by July 8th or propose a written payment arrangement. I attached the PDF of the note and the transfer confirmation. I expected anger. I expected silence. What I got was worse. By breakfast, he had blocked me. I found out because my next text did not deliver. My call went straight to voicemail. His social media profile, which had been full of motivational quotes and photos of espresso, no longer appeared when I searched from my account. It was such a childish move that for a minute I just stared at my phone, confused. This was a man who had borrowed nearly 50 grand from me, and his strategy was the same as a teenager dodging an ex. At 10:30 that morning, my Aunt Rosa called. "Mija," she said, in the careful voice people use when they have already chosen a side but want to sound neutral. "What is going on with you and Evan?" My stomach dropped. "What did he say?" She sighed. "He says you gave him money for his business and now you're demanding it back like some kind of investor because things are slow. He says you knew there was risk." I gripped the edge of my counter. "Did he tell you he signed a promissory note?" There was a pause. "A what?" "A note saying it was a loan, due June 17th, not a gift." Another pause. Shorter this time. "He didn't mention that." Of course he didn't. Evan's first move after denial was not repayment. It was story control. He couldn't erase my paperwork, so he tried to surround it with emotion before anyone saw it. By noon, I had texts from 2 cousins. One said, "I get you're stressed, but don't make Aunt Rosa's birthday drama worse." Another said, "Evan says you invested and now you're acting like he stole from you." My mother called crying because one of her sisters had told her I was threatening court over family help. That was the part I wasn't prepared for. Losing the money scared me. Being lied about made me shake. I worked that evening, and I remember standing in a supply room between shelves of gloves and saline flushes, reading a message from my cousin Laura that said, "He's telling people you offered it, and then changed your mind when his business had a delay." I had a patient waiting for pain medication. I had a new admission coming from the ER. I had a phone in my hand showing me that my family was becoming a jury Evan had selected before I even knew there was a trial. I wanted to throw the phone. Instead, I put it in my pocket, washed my hands, and went back to work. For the next week, my life split in two. At the hospital, I was competent Daniela. I checked labs. I called doctors. I calmed families who were scared enough to be rude. I charted until my eyes blurred. At home, I became defendant Daniela, answering relatives who had not asked for documents before forming opinions. Aunt Rosa invited me over to talk calmly. Calmly meant 6 people in her living room, including Evan's mother, my mother, 2 cousins, and Uncle Felix, who believed every problem could be solved by saying, Let's not make this bigger than it is, while making it bigger than it was. Evan was not there? That should have told me everything. I brought a printed copy of the note in a manila folder. My hands shook so badly in the car that I sat in the driveway for 5 minutes before going inside. The living room smelled like coffee and lemon furniture polish. Aunt Rosa had set out cookies, which somehow made the whole thing worse. People were softer when there were cookies. Softer, but not necessarily kinder. Uncle Felix started. Danny, everybody knows you're a good girl. Nobody is saying you're bad. That is always how bad conversations begin. But, he continued, Evan says this was business help, family help, and business has risk. I opened the folder. It was a loan. Evan's mother, my Aunt Carmen, looked exhausted. He says he felt pressured to sign something because you were nervous. I almost laughed. Pressured. In my kitchen. With his coffee and his leather folder and his $48,000 ask. He asked me for the money, I said. I agreed only because he signed this. I handed the note to Aunt Rosa first. She put on her reading glasses. Her lips moved slightly as she read. The room changed while she got through the page. It wasn't dramatic. Nobody gasped. But the air shifted. People who had been leaning back leaned forward. Aunt Rosa read one line out loud. Borrower acknowledges this is a loan and not a gift. Aunt Carmen closed her eyes. Uncle Felix cleared his throat. Well, yes, but sometimes people sign things without understanding. Evan sells contracts for a living, I said. Nobody answered that. My mother took the note next. She had not seen it before. Watching her read it hurt more than I expected. Her face went from worried to still, and then to something like shame. But not for me. She looked up and said, He signed this? Yes. And he told people there was no loan? Yes. Aunt Rosa removed her glasses and folded them in her lap. Danny, why didn't you show this sooner? The question was gentle, but I still felt it like a slap. Because I shouldn't have had to. Because a signed note should not need a public relations campaign. Because I was trying to protect everyone from exactly this living room. What I said was, because I hoped he'd pay. That was the first time Aunt Rosa switched sides. Not loudly, not with a speech. She just stood up, walked to the dining room, made a copy of the note on her old printer, and handed the original back to me. I will talk to him, she said. Uncle Felix muttered something about keeping peace. Aunt Rosa looked at him over her glasses. Peace without truth is just silence, she said. I loved her for that. But Evan did not care. Aunt Rosa called him that night. He didn't answer. She texted him. He replied with a paragraph that she forwarded to me after asking if I wanted to see it. I did, though part of me knew it would hurt. Tia, Danny is making this into something ugly. She wanted to help. Now she is scared because business is business. That paper was just to calm her down, not some legal attack. I am not going to be bullied by my own cousin. There were so many lies in that message that I didn't know which one to grab first. Just to calm her down. Legal attack. Bullied. He had taken my money, missed the deadline, denied the loan, blocked me, lied to relatives, and now he was the victim. And that is where I almost gave up. I know people like to imagine that revenge begins with a clean, satisfying snap. One day you are wronged, the next day you become calm and strategic and unstoppable. That was not what happened to me. I cried in my car. I ignored messages. I opened my banking app at 3 a.m. and stared at the number that was not there. I imagined court and felt sick. I imagined holiday dinners where half the room believed I had sued my cousin because I couldn't handle a business delay. I imagined my mother stuck between her daughter and her sisters. I imagined Evan shrugging somewhere, confident that I would choose discomfort over confrontation because I always had. There was another layer I didn't understand until later. Evan had not only told people a different story, he had chosen which people to tell first. He went to the relatives who disliked conflict, the ones who would rather swallow glass than ask a direct question at dinner. He went to Aunt Carmen, obviously, because she was his mother and had spent her whole life translating his mistakes into bad luck. He went to Uncle Felix because Felix believed courtrooms were for strangers and criminals, not people who shared a Thanksgiving table. He went to my cousin Rob because Rob liked feeling important and would repeat anything if it made him sound like he had inside information. By the time I heard the rumor, it had been softened and polished. I had not loaned Evan money. I had put money into his business. I was not asking for repayment. I was panicking because returns take time. The signed note was not a contract. It was one of Daniela's anxiety things. That phrase reached me through Laura, and I remember sitting on my bed with my shoes still on, feeling the heat climb up my neck. One of Daniela's anxiety things, as if caution were a character defect. As if being a nurse who double-checks medications before pushing them into someone's IV meant I was too unstable to understand money. Evan had found the exact weakness in my reputation and pressed on it. I was careful. I was nervous. I liked lists. I asked for things in writing. In a healthy room, those traits made me reliable. In Evan's version, they made me unreasonable. That was when I started saving not just the legal evidence, but the social evidence. I did not plan to show all of it in court. Priya later told me most of it would only distract from the clean debt claim. But for myself, I needed to see the pattern laid out. I made a separate folder called Family Messages. Every time someone texted me with a phrase that sounded like Evan, I saved it. Business takes time. You knew there was risk. Don't punish him for trying. The wording was too similar to be accidental. At work, I started catching myself checking my phone in the hallway between rooms, which was not like me. I missed a lunch break because I was in the stairwell reading a paragraph from Rob about how litigation destroys families. I had to close my eyes and remind myself that a patient in 412 needed me more than Rob's borrowed opinion did. That was the first practical cost of Evan's lie. It didn't just take money. It stole attention from places I could not afford to be distracted. One night, around 2 a.m., an older patient named Mr. Kaplan asked if I was all right. I was adjusting his IV pump, and I must have looked worse than I thought. Long shift, I said. He looked at me over the blanket. Longer than usual? I smiled because he had me there. Family stuff. He nodded like that explained every war ever fought. Get it in writing, he said. I froze with my hand on the pump. He didn't know anything. He was talking about his own daughter, apparently, who was arguing with a contractor. But the sentence landed so cleanly that I had to step into the hallway afterward and breathe. The whole world, it seemed, knew the rule. Only Evan had decided it shouldn't apply to him. A few days after Aunt Rosa saw the note, she asked me to come by alone. I expected another family council, and I almost said no. But her voice sounded different. Not worried. Tired. When I arrived, she had tea on the table and a yellow legal pad beside her. She had written dates on it in her careful, slanted handwriting. I talked to Carmen, she said. Then I talked to Rob. Then I talked to Felix. I wanted to see where the story changed. That was Aunt Rosa. Once she believed the paper, she became more organized than any of us. She walked me through what she had heard. To Carmen, Evan said I had surprised him with legal language after promising to invest. To Rob, he said I knew I might not get money back for a year. To Felix, he said I was using the note to demand more than he owed. 3 audiences, 3 versions. Same goal. He is not confused, Aunt Rosa said. I looked down at my tea. No. I am sorry I believed him first. That almost broke me more than the accusations had. I had been braced for defense, not apology. You asked when I showed you the note, I said. That matters. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Your father would have brought 3 copies. I laughed, then cried a little, and she pretended not to notice because she loved me. That visit gave me one more thing I needed: a witness who could describe the family pressure if it ever became relevant. Priya later said we probably would not need Aunt Rosa's testimony because the documents were stronger than the drama. But knowing Aunt Rosa had watched Evan's story mutate gave me steadier ground. It meant I was not imagining the manipulation. It meant the room was not as foggy as he wanted it to be. Evan kept making small mistakes because he could not stop talking. That is something charming people sometimes forget. Charm works best when there is no transcript. Once there is a record, every confident sentence becomes a possible exhibit. He sent Aunt Rosa a voice memo saying, "Danny is acting like I robbed her," when she knows she wanted to be part of this. Aunt Rosa did not forward the audio at first because she felt guilty. Then he sent another one saying, "If she keeps pushing, I'm going to tell people what she's really like with money." That one she sent. Priya listened to it and said, "He threatens vaguely. That's useful, but don't let it pull us off the main road. Main road is debt. Signed note, transfer, non-payment." The main road became my mantra. When a cousin sent a paragraph, main road. When Aunt Carmen cried to my mother, main road. When I woke at 4 a.m. thinking about Thanksgiving, main road. Evan wanted me in the weeds, because he was better in the weeds. He could make the conversation about tone, loyalty, anxiety, timing, disrespect, embarrassment. Anything except the one page with his name on it. Priya's gift was dragging everything back to pavement. The lowest point came on a Thursday after a double shift. My mother was at my apartment, folding laundry because she was worried and needed something to do with her hands. She had been on the phone with Aunt Carmen that afternoon, and I could tell from the way she avoided my eyes that it had not gone well. "Your aunt says Evan is under a lot of pressure," she said. I laughed once. It came out flat. "So am I." "I know." She folded one of my scrub tops, then unfolded it and folded it again. She asked if maybe you could give him more time. He has had more time. Maybe a payment plan? I offered that. He blocked me. My mother nodded. She knew. She had seen the messages. Still, the family pressure was working on her because that is what family pressure does. It finds the softest person in the room and makes them carry the message. "I don't want you to be hurt worse," she said quietly. That broke me. Not because she was wrong to worry, but because for 1 second I heard the request underneath it. "Please absorb this so the rest of us don't have to feel it." I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the tub with the fan humming overhead and cried so hard my throat hurt. I thought about dropping it. I really did. $48,000 is a lot of money, but lawsuits sounded expensive too. Court sounded humiliating. The family conflict was already poisoning everything. Maybe I could rebuild. Maybe I could work overtime. Maybe I could tell myself I had paid $48,000 to learn who Evan was. Then my phone buzzed. It was Mateo. "You home?" I wiped my face and replied, "Yes. Why?" "Coming over. Need to tell you something." Mateo arrived 20 minutes later carrying a paper bag from the taco place near his shop. He looked at my face, looked at our mother pretending not to look from the couch, and said, "Okay. So he's doing the thing again." I froze. "What thing?" Mateo put the bag on the counter. "You remember when I was trying to buy that tow truck 3 years ago?" I did. Mateo had wanted to start a small roadside assistance side business. It never happened. He had said the seller backed out. He rubbed the back of his neck. Seller didn't back out. Evan said he knew a guy who could get me a better deal at auction. I gave him $8,000. He kept it for 4 months, then told me the auction fell through and he'd pay me back. I got $2,000. Never saw the rest. My mother made a small sound from the couch. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because I felt stupid," Mateo said. "Because he made it sound like I misunderstood. Because when I pushed, he told Uncle Felix I was harassing him over a failed business favor." Sound familiar? I sat down slowly. Mateo pulled out his phone and scrolled. "I still have some texts. Not enough for court, probably. I didn't get a note. I was dumb." "You weren't dumb," I said. "You trusted family." He gave me a look. "Yeah, that's the expensive version of dumb in this family." It was a dry joke, but his eyes were angry. Not loud angry, protective angry. He showed me the messages. Evan promising an auction date. Evan asking for a little more time. Evan saying, "Don't make this weird, bro." The same word. Weird. I felt something inside me settle. That was the moment I stopped thinking of my paperwork as a shield and started thinking of it as a lever. I wasn't just trying to get money back anymore. I was trying to stop Evan from teaching the family that documentation didn't matter if you could perform hurt feelings loudly enough. I was trying to stop him from doing to someone else what he had done to Mateo, only bigger. And for the first time since the kitchen confrontation, I felt less ashamed than angry. The next morning, after sleeping 4 hours, I called a legal aid referral line on my lunch break. The woman who answered gave me 3 numbers. The first attorney didn't handle private loans. The second was booked out 6 weeks. The third, a civil attorney named Priya Shah, offered a paid consultation the following Tuesday at 8 a.m. I took it even though it meant driving there after a night shift. Priya's office was above a dentist in a brick building with terrible parking. I arrived wearing yesterday's exhaustion and clean scrubs because I didn't have time to change. She was in her 40s, with sharp glasses and a calm manner that made me want to hand her every problem I had ever had. Her conference room had a round table, a glass pitcher of water, and one framed print that said, "Document everything." I took that as a sign. I laid out the folder. Signed note, transfer, email, texts, screenshots of him blocking me, relatives' messages repeating his gift story. Mateo's texts, which Priya said might not be directly relevant but helped explain pattern and credibility if things got messy. She read silently for a while. Attorneys read differently than other people. They don't react at the parts where you want them to react. They look for hinges, dates, names, terms, missing pieces. Finally, she tapped the promissory note with one finger. "This is good." I breathed for what felt like the first time in a week. Good as in emotionally good, or good as in legally good? She smiled. "Legally good. It's plain, but plain is not bad. Amount, parties, date, due date, interest, signed by both, express statement that it is not a gift. Then you have the bank transfer and texts referencing repayment. If he wants to argue gift, he has a problem. He says it was just to calm me down. People can say many things. Judges tend to prefer signed writings." I looked down at my hands. "What happens if I sue him?" Priya explained it in the same calm voice. "Because of the amount, it might exceed small claims depending on jurisdictional limits, so we would file a civil complaint in municipal or common pleas court, or she could advise me on the best venue. We would first send a formal demand letter. It would cite the note, attach copies, give him a deadline, and offer one last chance to pay or enter a written settlement. If he ignored it, we filed. If he failed to answer, default judgment. If he answered with a gift story, we moved forward with documents." "And collecting?" I asked. "Because a judgment doesn't put money in my account." Priya nodded like she appreciated the question. Correct. A judgment is a court saying he owes you. Collection is the next step. If he has wages, bank accounts, property, or business receivables, there are tools. Garnishment, judgment lion, debtor's exam if needed. You mentioned he bought a townhouse? I think so. He posted pictures. If it's in his name, a certificate of judgment can create a lien on real property in the county. That doesn't always mean immediate payment, but it clouds title. If he tries to sell or refinance, it has to be dealt with. It can also motivate people who care about appearances. People who care about appearances. That was Evan in 5 words. I asked what it would cost. Priya told me. It was not cheap, but it was not $48,000. She also said that if the note allowed costs, we could ask for filing fees and allowable costs. Attorney fees were less certain because my simple note did not include a fee-shifting clause. I wished I had known to add one. She said not to beat myself up. You did the important thing, she said. You made him sign the debt. Most people don't. When I left her office, the morning sun was too bright. I sat in my car with the folder on the passenger seat and felt a strange mix of relief and grief. Relief because I had a path. Grief because taking that path meant accepting that Evan was not confused. He was choosing this. Before filing, Priya also had me do something that felt small, but turned out to matter. She asked me to request a complete transaction record from my credit union, not just the screenshot I had saved. The screenshot was good, she said, but an official record was better. So on my next day off, I drove to the branch where I had opened my account years earlier. The teller was a young man with a name tag that said Caleb. He asked how he could help, and I said I needed documentation of a wire transfer from April. My voice sounded normal until he asked the amount. Then it caught. 48,000, I said. He looked up, not nosy exactly, but human. We can print the confirmation and a statement page showing the debit. Do you need it stamped? I did not know stamped was an option. Yes, please. He disappeared to a back office and returned with 3 pages. Each had the credit union logo. One showed the outgoing transfer, one showed the account balance before and after, and one showed the recipient information Evan had given me. Caleb stamped the copies with a blue bank stamp and initialed them. The sound of that stamp hitting paper felt absurdly comforting. Thump, thump, thump. Not emotion. Record. On the way home, I stopped at a copy shop and scanned everything into a single PDF. The clerk asked if I wanted the pages stapled. I almost said no because I had my own system, then said yes because I liked watching someone else put order to it. She lined up the pages, tapped them on the counter, and pressed the stapler once. Another small sound. Another tiny piece of structure in a situation Evan wanted messy. Priya also told me to write a contemporaneous memo for myself, not a dramatic statement. Just what I remembered, while I remembered it. The April call, the Sunday kitchen meeting, the exact words about the note, the refrigerator conversation. The family meeting at Aunt Rosa's. Memories fade, she said. Write it now. Even if we never use it, it helps you testify cleanly. That memo took me 3 nights. The first night, I got through the kitchen meeting and had to stop. The second night, I wrote the denial scene and found myself pressing the pen so hard it tore the page. The third night, I typed everything because my handwriting had become unreadable. I included details that seemed too small for court but important to me. The latte on the table, the silver watch, the patio door open, the word weird, the way Evan lowered his voice in the church basement. When I sent it to Priya, she replied, "Good. Keep this. Do not edit it except to correct dates." That instruction mattered because I had the urge to make myself sound better. Less emotional, more certain. But the truth was that I had been emotional, I had been uncertain. I had almost dropped it. None of that made the debt less real. Priya kept reminding me that being hurt did not make me unreliable. It made me a person who had been hurt. There was one more consultation before filing that I still think about. Priya asked if I wanted to offer a structured settlement in the demand letter. Maybe $10,000 down, then monthly payments, secured by a confession of judgment or some other enforceable document. I hated that idea at first. It felt like giving Evan another chance to slow walk me. But she said, "Judges like reasonableness, and you want payment, not theater. If he refuses a reasonable off-ramp, that helps the story too." So we included it. Full payment was demanded, but the letter said I would consider a written payment plan if he responded before the deadline with financial documentation and an initial good faith payment. Not a text promise, not a cousin promise, a written plan with consequences. I remember reading that paragraph and thinking, this is what fairness looks like when it has learned not to be naive. Evan ignored that too. Later, when relatives said I had rushed to court, I could point to the demand letter. Not to argue, just to state a fact. He had an off-ramp. It had a date, a phone number, and a lawyer's letterhead. He drove past it, honking. The demand letter went out the following Monday. Priya drafted it on firm letterhead. It was 3 pages, clean and direct. It stated the amount, the date of the loan, the repayment deadline, the missed extension, and Evan's refusal to communicate. It attached the signed promissory note, the bank transfer confirmation, and the text where he agreed to repay by July 1st. It gave him 10 business days to pay in full or contact her office to negotiate a written repayment plan. It said that if he failed to respond, I was prepared to pursue all available legal remedies, including judgment and post-judgment collection. Before she sent it, Priya emailed me a copy for approval. I read it 4 times. Seeing it on letterhead did something to my nervous system. The same facts that had sounded messy in family texts looked almost boring in legal format. Borrowed, signed, transferred, due, unpaid, demand. There was no paragraph for, "But Aunt Carmen cried." No line item for Uncle Felix thinks court is embarrassing. No footnote for, "He was charming when we were kids." Just the facts. Evan received it on a Wednesday. I know because Priya sent it certified mail and by email. The green card came back with his signature, a looping E that matched the note almost perfectly. That small detail would matter later in a way he did not understand yet. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then Aunt Carmen called my mother. Then my mother called me. "He's furious," she said. I was in the grocery store standing in front of the bananas. "Did he call the lawyer?" "I don't know. He told Carmen you hired someone to threaten him." A demand letter is not a threat. It's an off-ramp. My mother repeated that softly, like she was trying to learn a new language. An off-ramp. Yes, he can pay, or propose payments, or he can keep pretending. He chose pretending. 3 days before the deadline, Evan unblocked me long enough to send one message. "I can't believe you're doing this. Over money you offered. If you embarrass the family in court, that's on you." I stood in my kitchen, reading it while the washing machine thumped unevenly down the hall. My thumb hovered over the screen. I wanted to reply with a paragraph. I wanted to send the note again. I wanted to ask how he slept. Instead, I forwarded the message to Priya and wrote nothing back. That was harder than it sounds. Silence feels unnatural when someone is rewriting you in real time. You want to correct the record line by line. You want to chase every lie into every corner. But Priya had warned me. "Once I send the letter," she said, "do not argue with him. If he contacts you, save it and send it to me. Let his words become evidence instead of conversation." So I let his words become evidence. The deadline passed. No payment, no proposal, no call from another attorney. Priya filed the complaint. The day she sent me the stamped copy, I was at home between shifts. I opened the PDF and saw my name against his. Daniela Reyes, plaintiff. Evan Morales, defendant. There is no way to make that feel normal when the defendant once helped you carry folding chairs after your father's memorial service. I stared at the caption until the words blurred. Then I printed it. I put the complaint in the folder behind the demand letter. The folder was thick now. Not dramatic thick. Not movie evidence box. But thick enough that when I set it on the kitchen table, it made a sound. Evan was served on a Friday morning at his townhouse. I know because the process server's affidavit said 8:37 a.m. Front porch, adult male identifying as Evan Morales. The affidavit noted he refused to take the papers by hand, so they were placed at his feet. That sentence was the first thing in the whole mess that made me laugh. He refused to touch reality, so reality was placed at his feet. By Friday afternoon, the family group chat exploded. I was not in the main one anymore. Someone had quietly started a version without me, which is one of those discoveries that hurts even when you are too old to care about group chats. Laura sent me screenshots because she said, "You should know what he's saying." Evan wrote, "Daniela officially sued me over a family investment she knew was risky. I hope everyone sees who she is now." Uncle Felix replied, "This is too far." Aunt Carmen sent a crying emoji and wrote, "My son does not deserve this." Then Aunt Rosa replied with a photo of the signed note. Just the note. No comment. The chat went quiet for 11 minutes. Laura told me later she watched the typing bubbles appear and disappear like fish under ice. Finally, Evan wrote, "That doesn't tell the whole story." Aunt Rosa replied, "It tells the part with your signature." I saved that screenshot too. Not because it was legally necessary, because some evidence is for court, and some evidence is for your soul. Evan filed an answer just before the deadline. Priya sent it to me with a note that said, "Call me when you have a chance. Don't panic." Of course, I panicked immediately. His answer denied that the money was a loan. It said the funds were provided as a family contribution to a business venture. It said any signed document was informal and not intended by defendant as a binding contract. It said repayment, if any, was contingent upon business success. It said I had unclean hands because I was allegedly attempting to use the courts to pressure a relative. I read that phrase 3 times. Unclean hands. I had spent the morning cleaning a wound on a man who apologized for bleeding on the floor, and my cousin was accusing me of unclean hands because I wanted my money back. Priya was not worried. "He has a lawyer?" I asked. "No, he filed this himself." "You can tell?" "Yes." There was a pause, and I could hear papers moving on her end. "Daniela, this answer is mostly feelings dressed up as defenses. The court will care about whether there was an enforceable loan. We have the note, transfer, and texts. His statement that the document was not intended to be binding is not strong when the document itself says the opposite." "So what happens now?" "We prepare. He may try to intimidate you before the hearing. Don't engage." He did try. First came the social pressure. Aunt Carmen called my mother every other day. Uncle Felix left me a voicemail saying, "You need to think long term. Money comes and goes, but family is forever." I did not call him back because I was afraid I would say, "Apparently money goes when Evan takes it." And I was trying to be a better person than that. Then came the pity campaign. Evan told people his business had collapsed because the clinic administrator backed out. He said he was facing debt. He said I was adding stress when he was trying to rebuild. He posted a quote online that said, "Sometimes the people closest to you become the lesson." Mateo sent me a screenshot with the message, "He owes me $6,000 and you 48, but sure, he's a philosopher now." Then came the dare. We were both at a family baptism in August. I had considered not going, but the baby had done nothing wrong, and I was tired of letting Evan decide where I could exist. The church basement smelled like coffee, frosting, and floor cleaner. Folding tables were covered in plastic cloths. Children ran between chairs with cupcakes they had no intention of finishing. Evan waited until I was near the hallway to the bathrooms. He stepped in front of me with a paper plate in one hand and that same watch on his wrist. "You enjoying this?" he asked. I looked past him. "Move, Evan." "No, seriously. You enjoying making everyone uncomfortable?" "You did that when you lied." His jaw tightened. "Careful." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because of the nerve it took to threaten caution after ignoring every warning sign I had given him. "Or what?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You think you're going to stand in front of a judge and make me look bad? Go ahead. Embarrass the family in court. See who thanks you when this is over." There was the second line I would remember later. The first was, "There was never any loan." The second was, "Embarrass the family in court." He said it like court was a stage, and shame was a weapon only he knew how to use. What he didn't know was that by then, I had already stopped thinking of court as embarrassment. I had started thinking of it as the only room left where he didn't get to control the story. I stepped around him without answering. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the bathroom, but I did not cry. That felt like progress. Preparation for court was not cinematic. No dramatic montage. No secret investigator. Mostly, it was me sitting at my kitchen table after work, drinking reheated coffee, labeling documents until the words stopped looking like words. Priya had me create a clean timeline. April 12th, first call. April 18th, signed note and transfer. June 17th, original due date. June 18th, extension request. July 1st, missed extension. July 7th, denial at family gathering. July 8th, written demand from me with attachments. July 15th, formal demand letter. July 29th, complaint filed. August 2nd, service. She told me to make 3 copies of everything. 1 for me, 1 for the court, 1 for Evan. "Judges appreciate organization," she said. "It signals that you respect their time." Respecting people's time was something nurses understood. I bought exhibit tabs from an office supply store and spent a whole evening making binders. Exhibit A, promissory note. Exhibit B, bank transfer confirmation. Exhibit C, email transmitting signed note. Exhibit D, text extending repayment to July 1st. Exhibit E, text where I called it a $48,000 loan and he did not deny it. Exhibit F, demand letter and delivery confirmation. Exhibit G, his message daring me to embarrass the family in court. Priya said we might not need all of it, but having it ready mattered. Mateo came over one night while I was assembling the binders. He brought a 6-pack of ginger ale because I was on call and couldn't drink. He sat across from me, peeling labels off exhibit tabs with his thumbnail. "You know he's telling people you forged something now," he said. I looked up. "What?" "Not the signature exactly. More like you tricked him. He told Cousin Rob that you slipped papers in while he was distracted." I stared at him. Mateo shrugged. "I know. Apparently you're a criminal mastermind with a nursing license and a printer from 2016. The printer comment made me laugh so hard I had to put my head down on the table. It was the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. Then Mateo's face got serious. "I'm proud of you." I didn't know what to do with that, so I lined up the binder clips. "I'm terrified," I said. "Yeah, do it terrified." That became my private phrase. Do it terrified. When I printed the exhibits, when I reviewed my statement, when I ignored Uncle Felix's second voicemail, when Aunt Carmen sent me a text that said, "Your father would be ashamed of this." and I had to sit down because that one found the bone. I did not answer her immediately. I wanted to. I wanted to say my father was the reason there was a note. My father was the reason I knew better than to hand someone money on a handshake. My father was the reason Evan's lie had a wall to hit. Instead, I waited until my breathing slowed and replied with one sentence. My father taught me to write loans down. She did not respond. There was also a pretrial conference before the hearing, and that was the first time I saw Evan try his story on someone outside the family. It was over video, which somehow made it more awkward. I was in Priya's office, sitting beside her at the conference table. Evan appeared from what looked like his car, phone angled up from below, sunglasses pushed on top of his head. A magistrate came on screen and explained that the purpose was to see if the case could settle. The magistrate asked Evan if he disputed receiving the money. No, he said, but the context is being ignored. She asked if he disputed signing the note. Not exactly. Priya's foot shifted under the table. Not exactly is not an answer people use when the truth is helping them. The magistrate asked what he meant. Evan launched into the family version. He said, I was anxious. He said I wanted to support him. He said he felt bad that the business had delays. He said he had always intended to make things right, but that my lawsuit had made cooperation difficult. He used the word cooperation 3 times, which was impressive for someone who had blocked me. The magistrate listened, then asked, What amount can you pay today to begin resolving the debt? Evan blinked. Today? Yes. I don't have funds available today. What can you pay within 30 days? He looked away from the camera. I would need to see how things shake out. That was Evan's whole financial philosophy in one sentence. Things would shake out. Someone else would wait. Someone else would absorb the uncertainty. Someone else would be unreasonable for asking when. Priya offered a settlement number that included the principal and a reduced amount of interest if he paid quickly. Evan said he needed time. The magistrate asked how much. He said 90 days. Priya asked for a signed agreement and a partial payment. Evan said he did not want to sign anything because signatures were what got us here. The magistrate looked at him through the screen. Mr. Morales, the issue is not that you signed something. The issue is that you have not paid according to what you signed. I had to look down at my lap. The conference ended without settlement, but it did something important for me. It let me watch Evan's method fail in a neutral room before the real hearing. The pauses that made relatives uncomfortable did not move the magistrate. The wounded tone did not change the dates. The vague promise to make things right did not become a payment plan. For months I had been afraid that maybe, in a formal setting, he would sound convincing. Instead, he sounded exactly like a man trying to explain around a document he wished did not exist. After the call, Priya leaned back and said, That was useful. It felt awful. Useful and awful often overlap. She was right. From then on, my fear changed shape. I was still scared of court, but I was no longer scared that Evan had some brilliant defense hiding in his blazer pocket. His defense was the same one he had used in the kitchen. There was never any loan, except the signed loan. I had helped family, except the transfer and repayment texts. He meant to make it right, except he had ignored every chance to do so. Once you saw the structure, the fog thinned. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in October. By then, almost 6 months had passed since I had wired the money. 6 months of overtime shifts. 6 months of checking my account and feeling the missing amount like a pulled tooth. 6 months of relatives treating me like a weather event they hoped would pass. 6 months of Evan acting wounded in public and silent in legal filings. The night before court, I slept 2 hours. I laid out my clothes like I was preparing for an exam. Navy slacks, white blouse, gray cardigan, flats I could walk in. Nothing flashy, nothing apologetic. The folder and binders went into a tote bag by the door. I checked them 3 times. At 5:40 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made toast I didn't eat. My mother arrived at 7:15. I had not asked her to come. She simply knocked, holding 2 travel mugs of coffee. "If you don't want me there, I can wait outside," she said. I hugged her. For a second we were both quiet. "I want you there," I said. Mateo met us at the courthouse. He had taken the morning off from the shop and wore a button-down shirt that still somehow looked like it belonged near an engine. Aunt Rosa was already inside, sitting on a bench with her purse on her lap and her church rosary wrapped around one hand. Seeing them there did something to me. The family had not united around me, but some of them had chosen truth, and that was enough to keep me standing. Evan arrived at 8:43. The hearing was at 9 o'clock. He came alone, no lawyer, wearing a charcoal suit and the silver watch. He looked good. That irritated me more than it should have. I wanted guilt to show physically. I wanted lies to wrinkle a collar or dull a shine. They don't. Sometimes people walk into court looking polished because they have spent their whole lives learning that presentation gets them past substance. He saw us. His eyes moved from me to my mother, to Mateo, to Aunt Rosa. He looked offended, as if witnesses were a betrayal. Then he sat on the opposite side of the hallway and stared at his phone. Priya arrived 5 minutes later with a slim leather case and the kind of calm that should be available by prescription. She greeted my family, reviewed the order of events with me, and reminded me to answer only what was asked. "Let the documents do most of the talking," she said. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Not grand, no soaring ceiling, just rows of benches, a judge's bench, flags, microphones, and fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. A few other cases were called before ours: a landlord-tenant dispute, a credit card collection, a woman trying to explain why she missed a payment after losing her job. Ordinary problems moving through an ordinary room. Then the clerk called our names. I stood. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. At the table, Priya placed our binder in front of her. Evan placed one folder in front of himself. It was thin. I noticed that. I tried not to attach hope to it. The judge was a woman in her late 50s with short gray hair and reading glasses low on her nose. She had the manner of someone who had heard every possible version of people disappointing each other. Not cold, not warm, focused. Priya began. She stated that I had loaned Evan $48,000, that the loan was evidenced by a signed promissory note, that the funds were transferred, that repayment was due and not made, and that Evan had denied the debt despite written acknowledgement. She handed up the exhibits. The judge read the note first. The room was so quiet I could hear the paper shift. Then Evan got his chance. He stood a little too quickly. "Your Honor, this is a family matter that should never have been brought here. My cousin invested in my business. She knew there was risk. When things didn't go the way we hoped, she turned around and called it a loan." The judge looked over her glasses. "Did you sign the promissory note?" Evan glanced at the paper. "I signed something, yes, but it wasn't meant like that." "Like what?" "Like a legal thing. It was just to make her comfortable. She was nervous." Priya's pen stopped moving. I kept my eyes on the table because if I looked at Mateo, I knew I would lose focus. The judge said, "Mr. Morales, the document is titled Promissory Note. It states you borrowed $48,000. It states repayment was due June 17th. It states the funds are a loan and not a gift. What did you believe you were signing?" Evan's mouth opened, then closed. This was not yet the full collapse. This was the first crack. He said, "I believed it was informal." "Informal does not mean meaningless," the judge said. I felt those words move through the room. Priya then walked through the transfer. Bank to bank. Same date, same amount, receiving account tied to Evan's business. Then the texts. The extension request. His written promise to repay by July 1st. My later text calling it a $48,000 loan. No denial from him at that time. The judge asked Evan, "If this was not a loan, why did you text that you would repay by July 1st?" He shifted his weight. "Because I intended to take care of her if the business worked out." That is not what the text says. I was trying to keep peace. There it was again. Peace. In Evan's mouth, peace meant nobody holding him to what he wrote. The judge continued, "Did you ever send any written message before litigation stating that the money was a gift or investment rather than a loan?" Evan looked at his folder. He had nothing. I knew he had nothing because I had spent months saving everything. "Not in those exact words," he said. The judge nodded once and I saw Priya make a small note. Then Evan made the mistake that turned the hearing from stressful to unforgettable. He tried to perform for the room. "Your Honor, with respect, my cousin is a nurse. She's very detail-oriented. That's good in a hospital, but in family, she can be rigid." She made this bigger than it had to be. There was never any loan in the way she's saying. She helped family, and now she's trying to punish me because business is hard. My mother inhaled sharply behind me. Aunt Rosa whispered something under her breath in Spanish. The judge's face did not change, but her eyes sharpened. "There was never any loan?" the judge asked. Evan seemed to think she was accepting his framing. He nodded. "Correct. Not a real one." Priya stood. "Your Honor, may I direct the court to the first paragraph of Exhibit A?" The judge already had it in front of her. She looked down. She read silently. Then she read aloud, not loudly, but clearly enough that every person at both tables heard every word. On April 18th, Evan Morales, borrower, acknowledges receipt of $48,000 from Daniela Reyes, lender, as a loan and not as a gift. Borrower agrees to repay the full principal by June 17th. She paused. The room held still. Then she said, "Mr. Morales, is this your signature?" That was the moment. Not the judgment, not the lien, not the payment weeks later. That question was the moment Evan heard his denial run into his own name. He looked at the note. His face did something I had never seen before. The charm did not vanish all at once. It flickered like a light with bad wiring. First annoyance, then calculation, then a quick glance toward the benches, where my mother, Mateo, and Aunt Rosa sat watching, then back to the paper. His lips parted slightly. He swallowed. The judge waited. No one rescued him. Not Aunt Carmen with a story, not Uncle Felix with peace, not a group chat with selective screenshots, not the word family. In that room, there was only the paper, the transfer, the text, and his signature. "It looks like mine," he said. The judge's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Is it yours?" Another silence. The air conditioner hummed above us. Somewhere behind me, a phone vibrated once and stopped. I could see the edge of Evan's watch against his cuff, silver and heavy, and I remembered Mateo pointing it out at Aunt Rosa's birthday. I remembered Evan in my kitchen saying, "I'll sign your little note." I remembered him by the refrigerator saying, "There was never any loan." I remembered crying on the edge of my bathtub, almost deciding that the cost of peace was $48,000 and my own self-respect. Evan looked smaller from 6 feet away than he had ever looked across a family table. "Yes," he said finally, "it's my signature." The judge nodded. She did not smile. Priya did not smile. I did not smile. That restraint mattered. If I had gloated, even for a second, I think it would have cheapened what the truth was doing all by itself. The judge asked him if he had any evidence of an agreement that repayment was contingent on business success. He did not. She asked if he had made any payments. He had not. She asked if he disputed receiving the $48,000. He said no, but started to explain again that it was family support. The judge stopped him. Mr. Morales, family members can make loans to each other. A family relationship does not erase written terms. I wrote that sentence down even though I didn't need to. Sometimes you want a record of the exact words that gave you your spine back. Priya requested judgment for the principal, interest under the note, filing costs, and allowable expenses. Evan objected to interest because, as he put it, she knows I don't have that kind of cash right now. The judge looked at him for a long second. The issue is not whether repayment is convenient, she said. The issue is whether repayment is owed. I heard Mateo exhale behind me. The judge took a brief recess to review the calculations. Brief, in court, does not feel brief. Evan sat at his table staring down at his phone without touching it. Priya reviewed her notes. I looked at my hands. They were steady now, which surprised me. My fear had not disappeared. It had just finished its shift. When the judge returned, she ruled from the bench. Judgment for me in the full principal amount of $48,000, plus accrued interest under the note, court costs, and post-judgment interest as allowed by law. She explained the total calculation. I don't remember every number the first time she said it, because my ears rang a little after judgment for the plaintiff. Priya wrote it down. The final amount that day was a little over $49,300, with interest continuing until paid. Evan's head snapped up. Wait, so you're saying I owe all of it today? The judge looked at him. I am entering judgment. Collection procedures are governed by law. You may discuss payment with plaintiff's counsel. He turned toward Priya. For the first time in months, he looked directly at my side of the table without performing. Can we work something out? He asked. Priya's voice stayed calm. You had that opportunity before litigation. We can discuss payment terms, but judgment will enter. He looked at me then. Really looked. Not like a cousin. Not like a salesman. Like someone seeing the person he had counted on avoiding this. His expression had anger in it, yes, but under that was something closer to disbelief. He had believed I would fold. He had believed the family would make me fold. He had believed the court would treat a kitchen table paper like a family misunderstanding. He had believed his own story could become true if enough people repeated it. And now a judge had read his signature out loud. As we left the courtroom, Evan walked fast enough that the hallway swallowed him before anyone could speak. Aunt Rosa caught my hand and squeezed it. My mother cried quietly, which made me cry, which made Mateo look at the ceiling like the fluorescent lights had personally offended him. In the parking lot, Mateo said, "Well, that was satisfying in a deeply bureaucratic way." I laughed. It came out shaky, but it was real. I wish I could say the judgment ended everything. It did not. This is the part people forget. Winning in court is not the same as being paid. A judgment is a door opening. You still have to walk through it, and sometimes the person on the other side is trying to stack furniture against it. For 5 days after the hearing, Evan did nothing. No payment, no proposal, no apology. Priya sent his copy of the judgment and a letter inviting him to contact her office about payment arrangements. He did not respond. Then she began post-judgment collection. First, she ran a property search. The townhouse was indeed in Evan's name. Not a rumor. Not a filtered photo caption. Recorded deed, county records, purchased the previous year. There was a mortgage, of course, but there was equity. Enough that a lien would matter. Priya explained the next step. We would file a certificate of judgment with the county to create a lien against his real property. It would not mean someone showed up and took his house the next morning. Real life is slower and less dramatic than that, but it meant the judgment attached to the property. If he tried to sell or refinance, the lien would have to be satisfied. It also appeared in title searches, which mattered to people who wanted their lives to look clean. "Do it," I said. The certificate was filed on a Thursday. I know because I had just come off another night shift and was eating cereal at noon when Priya's email came in. Certificate recorded. 2 words. After months of paragraphs, 2 words felt elegant. Evan called her office the next afternoon. Not me. Her. That mattered. He had finally understood that he couldn't charm, shame, or block his way around the process. There were now systems involved that did not care how many aunties he could upset. Priya summarized the call for me. Evan was angry. He said the lien was unnecessary. He said I was trying to ruin his credit. He said he was in the middle of refinancing and this could create problems. There it was. The pressure point. He wasn't calling because he had discovered morality. He was calling because paperwork had reached something he wanted. What he didn't know was that the lien was not revenge for its own sake. It was collection. The exact thing the demand letter had warned him would happen if he ignored every off-ramp. 2 days later, Aunt Carmen called my mother again. This time, the tone had changed. Evan was trying to refinance the townhouse to pull out cash for the business, or so he said. The title company had found the judgment lien. The lender wanted it resolved. Suddenly, the family embarrassment had moved from my lawsuit to his paperwork problem. Uncle Felix left me a voicemail. "Danny, now that you've made your point, maybe you can release the lien so he can get financing and pay you." I played that voicemail for Priya, who closed her eyes for 3 full seconds before saying, "No." Then she explained why, even though I already knew. Releasing the lien before payment would give up leverage. If Evan wanted to refinance, the judgment could be paid from closing. The title company could handle it. Clean, documented, no handshake, no cousin discount, no, "I'll get you next week." Money in exchange for release. I told Uncle Felix by text because I wanted a record. The lien will be released when the judgment is paid through proper channels. Priya can coordinate with the title company. He replied, cold. I stared at that word and thought about the supply room, the blocked number, the bathroom floor, the signed note Aunt Rosa had to read out loud before people believed me. Then I put the phone down and went to work. The lien also exposed something Evan had carefully avoided saying out loud. He had assets. For months, the family had spoken as if he were a drowning man, and I was standing on the shore demanding my towel back. But drowning men do not usually own townhouses with enough equity to refinance. Drowning men do not usually wear watches that cost more than my first car. Evan was not broke in the helpless sense. He was illiquid in the selective sense. Money existed when it supported his image. Money disappeared when it was owed to someone who trusted him. Priya had warned me not to become obsessed with his spending, because courts do not punish people for bad priorities in the abstract. But emotionally, it mattered. I started remembering details I had brushed aside. The weekend trip he posted in June, 2 days after asking me for more time. The steakhouse photo in July, after blocking me. The new patio furniture visible in the background of Aunt Carmen's video call. None of those things individually proved anything. Together, they told the same story as the lawsuit. Evan did not lack access to money. He lacked willingness to put my claim above his comfort. When the title company got involved, everything became precise. They asked Priya for a payoff good through a specific date. Priya calculated daily interest. I had never thought about interest as something that could grow by the day like a quiet vine. Evan had. He had signed that clause. Every day he delayed, the number moved. Not by much, but enough to remind him that time was no longer his free hiding place. He tried one last side door. He emailed Priya directly and copied me. even though she had told him not to contact me. The email said, "I am willing to pay Daniela $40,000 immediately if she agrees to consider the matter resolved and releases all liens today. This is more than fair considering the original understanding and the damage done to my reputation." I read it twice. 40,000. After a judgment over 49, after months of lies, after a lien. He was still trying to turn repayment into a discount for the inconvenience of catching him. Priya replied without drama, "My client declines. The payoff amount is attached. Upon receipt of certified funds for the full payoff amount, we will file the release." He wrote back 11 minutes later, "This is why families fall apart." Priya forwarded it to me with no comment. She didn't need one. I thought about responding, but by then the discipline had become easier. Evan was not speaking to me. He was speaking to the imaginary audience in his head, the one where he was always reasonable and everyone else was forcing his hand. I closed the email and went for a walk around my apartment complex. It was cold enough that my ears hurt. I remember that because for the first time in months, the discomfort felt clean. Air, pavement, breath. Not rumor, not dread, just a body moving forward. The title company contacted Priya the following week. That was when things became almost funny in the driest possible way. The same cousin who had told everyone there was no loan now needed a payoff statement for the loan judgment so his refinance could close. Priya prepared it. Principal. Interest through the closing date. Court costs, recording fees. Total. Just under $50,000 by then. Evan objected to the number. Of course he did. He called Priya's office and said the interest was petty. Priya told him interest was in the note he signed. He said the recording fees were unnecessary. She told him they existed because he ignored the judgment. He said he should get credit for emotional distress caused by family conflict. Priya said, "That is not a credit recognized by the payoff statement." When she told me that, I had to mute myself because I laughed. Closing was delayed twice because Evan kept trying to negotiate around the payoff. The title company did not care. They had a recorded lien and a judgment amount. They needed a release. Releases require payment. This was the beauty of the mechanism once it left the family arena. It became boring. Beautifully boring. Cause and effect, document and consequence, signature and lien. During those 2 weeks, the family story changed again. That was one of the most revealing parts. When Evan thought he could win socially, I was greedy. When the note came out, I was rigid. When the judgment entered, I was dramatic. When the lien blocked his refinance, I was cruel. The accusation changed every time the facts got stronger. Aunt Rosa noticed too. She called me one evening and said, "People who tell the truth don't need a new story every week." I wrote that down on a sticky note and put it inside the folder. The payment finally came through on a Monday afternoon in November. Priya called while I was at home, cleaning the kitchen with a podcast playing too loudly. "Funds have cleared," she said. I leaned against the counter. "Say that again." "Funds have cleared." The title company wired the full payoff to our trust account. "After processing, we'll send your portion by wire. The release of lien will be recorded." I didn't cheer. I didn't scream. I slid down until I was sitting on the kitchen floor, the same floor where I had stood months earlier reading Evan's blocked message silence, and I cried. Not the panicked crying from before. This was different. It was exhaustion leaving my body in pieces. When the money hit my account, it was not exactly the same as before. Legal costs had taken some. Interest had added some. The math had moved around. But the hole was filled enough that I could breathe. More important, the story was corrected in the only language Evan had failed to manipulate: records. The collapse in front of the family happened quietly, which made it sharper. Aunt Rosa hosted Thanksgiving that year. I almost skipped it, but my mother wanted to go, and Mateo promised to sit next to me and kick my chair if anyone started nonsense. I brought sweet potatoes. Evan came late. He looked tired, not ruined, not destroyed. This was not that kind of story. He still had his townhouse. He still had his business dreams, whatever shape they had taken. He still had people who would make excuses for him because some families treat accountability like a contagious disease. But he did not have the story anymore. That was gone. He walked in with Aunt Carmen, avoided my side of the room, and set a store-bought pie on the counter. The silver watch was not on his wrist. I noticed. Mateo noticed too, because he leaned close and whispered, "Guess the watch had to contribute to family peace." I nearly choked on my water. Dinner was careful at first. People talked about football, weather, grocery prices, anything with no legal filings attached. Then Uncle Felix, because he could not help himself, said, "Well, I hope everyone learned something and we can move on." Aunt Rosa put down her fork. "Yes," she said. "We learned to read before taking sides." The table went quiet. Evan's face reddened. Aunt Carmen stared at her plate. My mother reached under the table and squeezed my hand. I did not say anything. I didn't need to. That was the strange gift of doing things properly. By the end, I did not have to argue my own reality in rooms where people had once debated it like a rumor. The judgment existed. The lien existed. The payment existed. His signature existed. The people who wanted to know the truth had enough to find it. After dinner, Evan caught me near the front hall while I was putting on my coat. For 1 second, I braced for another performance. Instead, he stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking past me at the door. "You got your money," he said. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I was wrong." Not even, "That got out of hand." Just that. I looked at him for a moment. I thought about saying so many things. I thought about Mateo's $8,000. I thought about my father. I thought about the judge asking, "Is this your signature?" I thought about every hour of overtime I had worked while Evan told people I was greedy. What I said was, "There was a loan." His jaw moved, but no words came out. Then I left. The aftermath was not a movie ending. Nobody carried me out on their shoulders. The family did not transform overnight into a healthy system with excellent boundaries. Aunt Carmen stayed distant. Uncle Felix still believed court was too much, though he stopped saying it to my face. Some cousins apologized. Some pretended they had never said anything. Laura sent me a message that simply said, "I should have asked you before believing him." That one meant more than the longer apologies. Mateo never got his $6,000 back. He did, however, start putting everything in writing. When he bought equipment for his shop, he made sellers sign receipts. When a friend borrowed his trailer, he took a photo of the license and wrote down the return date. He said I had turned him into Dad. I told him there were worse fates. Aunt Rosa kept her copy of the promissory note in a drawer for a while. She told me she didn't need it legally. She kept it as a reminder. Not that Evan was bad, exactly. Families are rarely that simple. She kept it to remember how easily affection can be used as cover when nobody asks to see the paper. As for Evan, his reputation did not explode. It deflated. That was more fitting. He still came to some gatherings, but the entrance changed. Less performance, fewer big announcements. When he talked about a new opportunity, people listened politely and asked boring questions. What kind of contract? What terms? Who's funding it? Is it in writing? He hated that. You could see it in the tight smile. But he had trained us in the end. Just not in the way he meant to. I rebuilt my savings slowly. I kept working. I took one small vacation the next spring, 3 days by a lake with my mother, where we drank coffee on a porch and did not talk about court until the last morning. She apologized then, not for asking me to drop it exactly, but for almost letting fear of conflict become advice. I wanted peace, she said. I watched the water move under a gray sky. I know. But you were right. Peace can't cost only one person. That was enough. The folder is still in my filing cabinet. I don't look at it often. I don't need to. But I know it's there. The signed note, the bank transfer, the demand letter, the judgment, the lien release. A paper trail of a truth that almost got buried under family pressure and a charming man's confidence. People sometimes hear this story and think the revenge was suing Evan. It wasn't. The revenge was giving him every chance to be honest, documenting each chance, and then letting the exact system he dared me to use answer him in public. He told me to embarrass the family in court. He thought embarrassment would stop me. He forgot that the person who should be embarrassed is usually the one whose signature proves the lie. And if there is one thing I carried from all of this, it is the thing my father tried to teach me before I ever needed it. Love your family. Help if you choose. Be generous when your heart says yes. But when money changes hands, write it down. Not because you expect betrayal, because if betrayal comes, the truth deserves a witness. Evan's witness was 1 page long, and when the judge read it out loud, there was never any loan became the last lie he got to tell without being answered.